Hi, I'm Phil Palucha from Billionaires in Boxes, and you are set to watch or listen to The Heart of the Trial. Fantastic interviews, incredible insights. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Turner, and welcome to a podcast delving into the personal narratives within the clinical research industry. Through candid interviews, we'll learn about the personal journeys and motivations of individuals who have chosen this profession, what I like to call their why. This podcast is not just for industry insiders. It's for everyone curious about the human side of healthcare. Beyond the industry's negative reputation, we'll shed light on the dedicated professionals behind clinical trials. Join us as we uncover the heart and passion of those working tirelessly behind the scenes in clinical research. Welcome to Heart of the Trial. Hello, lovely listeners. I'm your host, Suzanne Turner, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to Heart of the Trial, where we uncover the human stories within clinical research and shed a positive light on the pharmaceutical industry. On today's episode, we are going to be discussing a topic that is at the top of everyone's mind when discussing clinical trials: safety. Yeah, today's guest is Janet Koontz. She has over 20 years of experience in the industry, 10 of that spent focusing on safety. So hi, Janet. Welcome to Heart of the Trial.
Hi, Suzanne. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so thrilled to have you. I am so excited to talk about this topic.
Yeah, drug safety is not usually at the top of everybody's list because we tend to be like regulatory, kind of the policeman at a company that is saying, this is what we have to do, this is how we have to do it, or you can't do it that way. But it is a very important component to getting product through clinical trials.
I think, we've had the opportunity to work together and you're very familiar with TMF. So we've definitely connected on that because TMF is not always everyone's favorite for the same reason, like bugging. So we definitely have that in common, but it's so important. And I know that throughout the entire process, it's something everyone's always trying to keep in mind, the safety of the patient. So why don't you tell me tell me what your actual role is and how it fits into the clinical trial process.
Okay. Well, lately, in the last few years, I've been working as director or senior director, managing either a PD department, be it a team of one, or growing PD departments for small companies, and ensuring that we're following the regulations, we're meeting our obligations, and keeping inspection ready and getting that product, helping support that product get to approval. What I do and what drug safety does is we take adverse events, determine whether they're serious or not, determine whether they're related or not, and analyze the data on an ongoing basis to make sure that the product, drug or whatever, gene therapy, whatever, is going to be safe for the patients to receive. In a nutshell. Yeah. We have a lot of regulations as far as how we do that, what we have to do, how fast we have to do it, and doing these reports and things so that we're keeping compliant, keeping on top of the data, and keeping it clean, and getting it ready for that filing process.
Yeah, and just for our listeners' sake, in case any of them aren't familiar, PV is the abbreviation for pharmacovigilance, right? Yes, and pretty much it's just that drug safety process and watching how the drug reacts with individuals and such, right?
Right. So drug safety and pharmacovigilance are often used interchangeably. Some people are very like one word more than the other, one term more than the other. And so it's, for me, they're interchangeable.
Yeah.
I grew up with drug safety, pharmacovigilance. It's all taking these adverse events, serious adverse events that happen in the clinical trials, databasing them during the analysis, and getting the data to find out is this product safe to keep giving to patients?
Right.
And part of that process, we have a lot of documentation we do, and in clinical trials that, of course, includes the TMS and getting all that documentation in the TMF for inspections, supporting clinical operations and data management teams with the overlap between safety data and clinical data where that happens. And working with medical teams as well.
Yeah, you end up touching a lot of different areas in the trial when you're dealing with the safety and all. So tell me how it is that you ended up in this industry and ended up doing this. How did you start? Did you go in this to that mindset like this is what I want to do, or was it kind of accidental?
I took a very atypical long route to get into this role. When I was in high school, I took a VOTEC class on becoming a certified health assistant, which is kind of like a medical assistant, but we did things like dental offices and laboratories and nursing homes as well. And then I went to nursing school, and when I got out, I worked in doctor's offices, starting out in the back office where you get the patients ready for examination and help the physicians with the examinations and such. And then over the years, I kind of switched back and forth between the back office and the front office where you do all the scheduling and insurance and billing and things. Mm-hmm. I was a subject in a clinical trial, and I thought it was fascinating. And I thought, there's no way I know I can do this, but I want to learn what I would have to learn to do this, maybe. And then I saw a 3-line ad back in the days when we did job search classified ads. Dating myself just a little bit. But I saw a 3-line ad for a clinical research coordinator and thought, I want to find out. So I applied for it, and 3 interviews later, I was working. And got into clinical trials as a coordinator. You can get certified after 2 years. So after 2 years, I got certified as a research coordinator. And that's where we were. You'll see ads or hear ads on the radio where somebody's looking for a volunteer for a clinical trial. And what we do as a clinical research coordinator is we work with sponsor companies, pharmaceutical companies or biotech companies to do a clinical trial. Because the coordinator is actually at the site, like the doctor's office or whatever, right, that's participating in the trial, right? Right. So the doctor signs up and gets the study. The coordinator will do the screening to see if subjects are eligible for the study, if they match the criteria. And then we do the enrolling and we do the visits and send the lab work off and monitor the lab work and the adverse, collect the data that goes to the sponsor company. And then at some point, I trained and mentored and taught other people how to do that. Mm-hmm. And then I got into working on the sponsor side in clinical trials as far as clinical operations, supporting a clinical trial manager. And that's working really closely with the sites and the physicians and the study coordinators on getting a study started, getting all the right paperwork, making sure that all the paperwork throughout the trial is correct and fully collected, that the sites are enrolling, what can we do to help them enroll, and so on. Getting the data cleaned up.
So I was going to say, it sounds like that's a really natural transition because you were there doing the stuff of the site. Well, now you're doing it from the sponsor side. And because you had that experience, you know, this is how it should run and go, and being able to utilize that on the other side.
Right. And since the site coordinator is the one in clinical studies who actually captures the adverse event information from the patient, from the patient's mouth, and does the first documentation, then it goes to the clinical trial database and comes to safety. And clinical trial database and safety database are a little bit different. The clinical trial database collects everything about a person who's in a study. The safety database only collects that information about adverse events that we need to monitor and report to regulatory authorities. So I had experience, was very familiar with collecting the information, receiving the information, working with data management to do SAE reconciliations and making sure that the databases were reconciling and so on. And then safety. And when I found drug safety, I actually found my niche, what I call my home. And this is, it sounds kind of crazy, but it really fulfilled the logical science side of it to do with the data and make sure the data was clean. But it also filled the creative side of it, because when you write an AE report for a regulatory agency, you write a narrative. Yeah. And the narrative, you kind of explain what happened when they took the drug, what happened to the patient, how it was in relationship to when they took the drug. Was it related to the product or not? Are there other medications involved and so on? And you weave it into a story or a narrative. And so I really like that storytelling part of it. And did that very focused for about 10 years, from a beginning drug safety specialist to a senior drug safety specialist. And then I started moving up into the management. I had a boss who said there are two types of managers. There's one that manages projects and one that manages people. Which are you more interested in? And I said, yes.
Well, I can say from personal experience, you are fantastic with both. So
a little bit glutton for punishment. Yeah. But as part of managing teams and training people and onboarding and overseeing people to do the case processing and develop trainings and so on. So long story short, then I got into small companies. I worked at one company that went through very rapid growth, so we got exposed to building a lot of infrastructure and processes and systems. And so I've taken that skill and moved kind of to small companies and started applying that and helping to, from very small companies, there's usually, they outsource to vendors a lot. Yeah. There's usually only a few people internally in a PD or drug safety department. Right. And then we kind of build up the systems and processes and the infrastructure to support the growth as the product matures through the life cycle.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about the small pharma also, because as you know, that's my kind of area also, like taking all that knowledge and experience that we've gained throughout the years and being able to help a team and a company that truly needs it, right? So, yeah, I absolutely love that. Well, real quick for our listeners, AE is adverse event and SAE is serious adverse event. So, what we've been talking about, and that way, yeah, I just kind of want the listeners are going to hear lots of acronyms. I just want to do my best to let them know what they are, because we don't want to lose anyone. So, also, I want to ask you, Janet, I have to ask you, can you tell us about the clinical trial that you were part of?
Well, I don't know if you remember, back in the day, there was a potato chip that they were trying to take 30% of the fat out of. And this is before air frying.
Okay. Yeah. I think I do kind of remember something about this.
And it was a pill that you took that blocked the absorption of fat.
Okay.
And, so it was a placebo-controlled, meaning you don't know if you're taking a real drug or a fake pill.
Right.
But based on the adverse events, you could tell that she was taking.
Oh, no.
And sometimes they switch it up where you're taking placebo and then the real drug and then placebo and real drug. They'll kind of switch it around.
I didn't actually know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know they could switch it up. I thought it was once you were... whichever one you were randomly assigned to, that's just the one you were on.
Yeah. No, it depends on the trial design.
Very cool.
So sometimes you can start on placebo and go to real drug, or start on real drug and go to placebo.
Gotcha.
And it helps them kind of compare the adverse events for each for placebo versus the real.
Oh my goodness. So you ended up on the pill.
But the really fun, at least part of the time, yes. But the really funny part of it was they took stool samples and sent them to Switzerland. Now, I've never been to Switzerland, but part of me has.
Oh my goodness. That's crazy. It really makes me wonder, like, what company or what it was, because, like, for them to choose Switzerland, as their central lab area is very, very interesting. And for our listeners, central lab is when they decide on a laboratory that's going to be used kind of for the entire trial, like all sites in the trial, and which is why they call it centralized versus like a local one. And so that means pretty much no matter where you're located, you send it into that lab, and even though you were in the US, it went to Switzerland. So that's crazy. Do you know, was that ever approved or anything? Do you know anything about it?
It was. The potato chips actually got onto my hands. So, somehow or other, they, I think the potato chips might have been xylitol, but it did get on the market for a little while. But they found that the GI symptoms people experienced, people didn't stay on the pill very long, so it wasn't very effective, and it kind of went off.
That doesn't shock me, because there are a lot of I think we all know there are a lot of drugs out there where GI upset is a very common side effect, to the point where it makes it so some individuals cannot continue on it. So, I think that is so fascinating and cool. When I worked at a clinical research organization, what we call a CRO in the industry, it was up in Kansas City, and they had a local phase 1 facility on site. So they ran phase 1 clinical trials. And for the listeners, phase 1 tends to be like the very first time a drug or whatever's being tested on humans. And so they're putting a lot of kind of faith in this new item. But they are being compensated for it. So we would see, a lot of traffic through that front door when they were running the different trials, and all. It was very, very fascinating. So,
so clinical trials go phase 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
And then if they get approved, they go to phase 4. So phase 1 is the very first time it's given to humans, and it's usually healthy volunteers, unless it's something like oncology or gene therapy. Mm-hmm. It's given to a very small number of people, and if they're healthy volunteers, sometimes they are in a very controlled environment 24/7 for a short number of days, a week or two, sometimes maybe a couple of days. A company I worked for did a fart study. And so,
Janet, your history is amazing.
So what this was this is a pill to help with people who had excessive gas.
Uh-huh.
And it was a phase 1 facility, so it's completely sealed. Nobody can hide anything. You're being watched 24/7, even when you sleep, which is why you're well compensated. And what they did was, when somebody passed gas, they would try to capture it in a jar. Now, I don't know what the laboratory part of that was, but it was fascinating to hear about that.
They try. I can't.
Had people chasing around, catching gas in a jar.
Oh my gosh.
So
I love this industry. Like, that's amazing. Oh my gosh. Oh, okay. So you've obviously been in this industry for a long time, and especially focusing on the safety area. So, like, why is it? What's made you want to continue to do this? Because 20 years, there has to be some reason why you decided to continue to put that much time and energy into it.
Well, I'm a Star Trek fan. So for me, it's kind of like it's described as being on the cutting edge of new medicine and finding out new things to treat people and give patients some of the help that they need with some of the medical conditions that they have. It's going where no man's gone before. When you get a product, we have scientists in the company who are designing a product and they say, we think we have this product that will treat such and such, and we're going to do a clinical trial and see if it works. If it works in phase 1, we go to phase 2, which is a slightly larger group. Mm-hmm. It's people who have the indication for the medication or the product. And if that is successful and the data comes back positive, we go to phase 3, which is a larger study.
Yes.
It's less restrictive as far as the subjects that are allowed to come in, what requirements the subjects have for getting in the study. And what we want to do is say, is it on a wider population or demographic, is it still safe for people with this indication for all the things that we haven't checked for yet? Mm-hmm. Now, and then if it's successful at phase 3, we go for approval.
Right.
And then sometimes we have phase 4 studies, which are post-approval or post-market.
And those, in my experience, the phase 4 studies are pretty much all safety-based. It's like just safety follow-up from the drugs on the market. And if anyone's ever seen, where it says like to contact this number if you are having side effects, that's because they're continuing to collect that safety data. So is that your experience? Do you agree with that phase 4 studies are pretty much primarily just safety studies for the most part? Yeah,
I do. And again, we're trying to check and make sure that they're safe, because in a clinical trial, we have strict criteria about who can be in the study.
Yep.
And once it's approved, it goes out, and anybody who can prescribe medication can prescribe it, whether it's for that indication or even what we call off-label for something else.
Right.
Most drugs that get approved, if they're going to fail within the first 5 years, you're approved. So we really we want to pay attention to that data. We want to look for things. There's been a lot of drugs that have been taken off the market because the data has come back and said, we don't think this is a good idea to let it loose in the world.
Yeah. It happened, I feel like just in the last year or so, there was a big one that this happened with. And I cannot think of what it was. I don't know if you can, but I feel like just in the last year or so, it was a pretty big one, very well known.
If you see any attorneys' ads on late night TV saying, if you've taken this drug and have any side effects, it's probably one of those off the market.
Oh my goodness.
It's another interesting thing is that adverse effects are not always bad.
Right.
So we look for things in clinical trials. One of the things we analyze for is what other medications are they taking? Because we want to look for drug-drug interactions.
Yeah.
That maybe if you mix these two drugs, something happens that's not good. So we'll put a warning on the label or have to reconsider. And if anybody opens up a box of medicine and you have that folded up paper with a teeny tiny writing that you need a microscope to read,
yes,
all of that information is safety information from a clinical trial. Mm-hmm. That's what we do. And you'll see it on almost every drug ad you see on TV or in the magazines will say, may cause headaches, may cause nausea, may cause vomiting, may cause diarrhea, may cause all these other symptoms. Mm-hmm. And that's because of the information that we collect in clinical trials. It doesn't mean the medication causes those things, because what we do is, as a clinical research coordinator, what I used to do is I would tell subjects when they came in, I want to know everything that happened since the last time I saw you. If you step off a curb and sprain your ankle, I want to know about it. Doesn't mean the product is causing one.
Right.
But if we have a lot of patients across the study who step off a curb and sprain their ankle, we have to look and see, is there a causal relationship between the product and stumbling and falling?
Yeah.
And an interesting thing is in hypertension studies, getting back to adverse events being positive, there was one hypertension study where the medication, the adverse events came back with men having hair grow in their ears and their nose hairs. And they were very embarrassed to talk about it. But they were growing hair faster and thicker. And they took a look at this and said, it's not working so great for hypertension or high blood pressure, but it works great for hair. And so it got remarketed, retested, and came out as Rogaine or minoxidil.
Wow. I did not know the history of that. And just for listeners' sake, to kind of build on what you said, if it's discovered that a drug is having these other effects and they decide, okay, we want to go for this in the hair growth, for example, like you said, they had to do another trial. They had to start a brand new trial from the very beginning and all over again. Yes. So I just wanted listeners to know that's how that process works. So,
right.
Yeah.
And another hypertension study, not that hypertension is the only one out there, but another high blood pressure study gave the world.
I was going to say that when you were talking about this, Viagra immediately came to my mind because tell me, I can't remember what was it it was originally for hypertension. That's what it was for.
Yes. For high blood pressure.
Yeah. But yes.
And that it didn't work so well on high blood pressure, but it works great for me.
Yes. That's,
and they actually even did, because my specialty, my background when I worked in doctor's offices was primarily OBGYN. They even did studies on Viagra for women for increased libido.
Oh, how interesting. And something else that's kind of come to my mind, like earlier when we were talking about, you were talking about the off-label reasons. So, and I think individuals do see this a lot. Like I was on a drug for migraines that actually is a seizure drug. And so that's what it's marketed for. And that's what the clinical trial was for. But they found that it tended to assist with migraines. So their off-labeling would subscribe it to that. I'm not on that drug anymore. It didn't work for me, but it worked, but it gave me some side effects that I wasn't willing to be okay with. But if they, again, kind of like we were just talking about, if they decided we truly want to market this as a migraine drug, like we were just saying, they have to go back and do a 100% clinical trial. But it's not uncommon for the off-label stuff. So,
right. Well, and Wellbutrin was initially for depression or anxiety. Yes. And it was used off-label for weight loss because they did notice there was an adverse event, and the data they collected, there was a significant amount of weight loss that was happening
because of the GI upset. Sorry. Back to what we were talking about. Yeah, I know. Okay.
Yeah. So they went back and they got it approved for as a weight loss drug.
Wow. I actually don't think I knew that Wellbutrin was used for that, because I was on that one for a while at one point for depression stuff, I think. So very interesting. It is so interesting how it all works. And that's why they monitor this so closely and why safety is so important, because you get to analyze that data and say, and make that distinction, like, yes, this is really working, or no, it's not, but it wasn't a waste of time or money or people's energy, because look what we could do with it.
Right. And just to finish up, Wellbutrin was also used to help people stop smoking.
Oh, how interesting.
That was another indication. Yeah.
How interesting.
So somebody goes into a clinical trial, they come in and see their coordinator, and they mention that they had, something happened. We list it as an adverse event. It comes to drug safety, and we enter it into the safety database as an individual case. Mm-hmm. And it's one case. And, each time a single person has something that happens to them, we make one case out of it. And then the other side of PV or drug safety is the aggregate data analysis, where we take all of those single cases and put the data all together and look at it. And that's where we're looking for trends. Mm-hmm. And numbers, and how often does this happen? What do all these patients have in common? Is there a commonality that we need to look at as far as, again, having them not mix it with another drug, or Is there something else that works? Or is there a reason they shouldn't take it? And then we do this analysis. So there's a lot of reporting, collecting, data entry, writing a narrative, reporting to our regulatory authorities, and then this analysis that's ongoing all the time. Every pharmaceutical company that has a product on the market has a responsibility to do drug safety, to do this analysis on an ongoing basis, and make sure that this product is safe and stays safe.
Right. Yeah. And I like how you brought up the regulatory part of it, because one of the things that, like, safety can be very complicated and difficult, especially those not inside of it and trying to understand it, which is one of the things I love about you, because I don't think I've ever had anyone explain safety the way you do, where I fully understand it. And again, I've been in the industry over 11 years. And so that's why I wanted you to talk about this on the podcast, because I love the way you do it. But for our guests' sake, so they know, like, when you're doing this stuff and you're submitting it to regulatories, you're having to be aware of what those rules are for the regulatory bodies around the world. So if it's somewhere in Japan that's participating, you have to know what the PMDA regulatory requirements for how fast you have to submit that, what you have to submit, etc. So you have to be very connected with that in order to do what you do.
Right. So every country has a regulatory body or regulatory authority. Right. In the US, it's the FDA. In the UK, it's MHRA. In Japan, it's PMDA, and so on.
Right.
And each regulatory body has their own rules for what has to be reported, how soon, what format, how much information, and so on. We collect a lot of data. Not all of it has to go to regulatory bodies. The part that we pay special attention to are those events that are associated with or potentially caused by the medication product, by the investigator, by the physician at the office who's actually hands-on with the patient. So if they assess it as being possibly related, then that kind of escalates everything up and we get on high alert.
Yes.
And our timelines start kicking in. And then we really do pay attention. Like, what could have caused this? Is it wholly caused by the medication or product? Are there other causal factors? Is there something else that could be maybe making this happen that's not the drug? And we do this ongoing analysis all the time. And that is what supports getting the product approved, is having this information. So part of what we also do is try to educate our investigators, our physicians. Some of them are very well versed in doing clinical trials. Some of them are fairly new to it. Some of them never really kind of got trained as well as how to assess causality or relationship to product. So drug safety also does that. Sites will have coordinators that turn over, and have new coordinators come on board. So we'll train them on what we expect from them to come to us so that we can fulfill our obligations. We'll train physicians, the investigators. And we'll train anybody who wants to know anything about drug safety, whether it's data management, ClinOps, or DMF, or anybody else. It's funny because I used to, when I was a drug safety specialist or a senior drug safety specialist, people would ask me, what do you do? And I'd say, well, I'm a senior drug safety specialist at such and such company, and I report adverse events to the FDA. And I kept thinking, there has to be a simpler way. Nobody knows what we do.
Yeah.
We have our own language, and you've pointed out and noticed we have our own terminology. We live in this very regulated world to keep everybody safe. But part of the reason for that, if you don't mind if I touch on that, is the FDA kind of evolved over time. And I'll talk about FDA and not the other country regulatory bodies. So if you think back, there used to be snake oil.
Yes. Yes.
And you never knew what was in there. It didn't come with any ingredients. They made all these promises of what the snake oil would do. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
And sometimes you think, well, maybe it's the placebo effect, because if somebody thinks it should work, it'll work. They found that there could be dung, cocaine, morphine, opioids, anything in this. Could be caffeine, could be oil, some of it's usually is safe to be consumed by humans, and some of it wasn't. Right. Take laudanum, for example. Laudanum is a form of opioid that women used to use for fainting spells and not feeling well, and a woman would have spells, and we're talking 1800, early 1900s.
Yes.
But there was no label.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knew who should take it, who should not take it. Nobody knew the purity or what the dose should be. So you had a lot of overdoses, whether they were accidental or intentional overdoses. Sometimes a woman would just couldn't take it anymore, and she would take to her bed and take laudanum until she passed away, and take more and more of it. So the FDA started out actually doing more in the way of like food safety and animal safety and so on. Meat products was a big topic. But then you started getting people who were taking medications and not doing well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll jump ahead to like the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. If you know of anybody who is a DES baby, diethylsylbenzoyl, was a medication given to women to help prevent miscarriages and premature labors. And the babies came out
missing limbs.
Mm-hmm. There was another medication that caused flipper-like limb, arms and legs.
Wow.
And so what the FDA does is they said, well, we need to regulate this industry to make sure that we're not putting medications out there that are going to cause more harm than good, which we call our risk-benefit ratio. The risk of taking it should be lower than the benefit of receiving it.
Yes.
And that's the crux of drug safety in a nutshell, actually.
Yes.
That's where all of our data goes and what it does. But they get these and so we wanted to make sure everything was safe. Sorry, in the check. And then we get these things on the market, and then once they're on the market, we're still monitoring safety. You've seen things like Seldane, Celebrex, and some other ones. There's an allergy medicine that was really popular for a while. It was taken off the market. And all of this is because of collecting the adverse events and doing the safety analysis.
It's amazing. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. I need to do a whole episode on historical incidents that led to the regulations that we have today, because I have several, and the I can never pronounce it right, but the one we were talking about with the baby limbs and all like that, that one that starts with a D, it's on my list, because these are the things that, I remind myself, like, this is why these horrible, horrible things happened, because there was no regulation. And now we really focus on the safety of humans when it comes to these. Like, it's a huge deal. So, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I could talk to you all day about this, but we do have to wrap up. So it's been so fascinating, Janet. I am so grateful to you to coming on, and I'm going to have you on again some point in the future, because you have so much knowledge and so many fun facts. Like, I'm going to be thinking about people running around trying to capture farts in a jar all day. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to come back anytime you want.
Oh, Perfect. We're going to have to set something else up. And before I let you go, let's tell the listeners, if they want to reach out to you, if they want to contact you in some way, what are the best ways to contact you? And I'll make sure it's in the show notes too.
Okay. I have 2 email addresses that I use primarily. One is a Gmail address. It's my last name, Koontz, Koontz, and my initials, JL, @gmail.com. I also, several years ago, splurged and bought a URL and have my own domain. And so that's Janet at janetlkoontz.com. I have no ego, so it's really kind of odd that I have one.
So funny.
And then if anybody has any urgent questions or anything, feel free to call me. My mobile number is 619-895-5439, and I'm happy to answer any questions anytime. I love drug safety. I love talking about drug safety, obviously, and sharing what I do and what I know to help other people.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you are on LinkedIn also. They can search for your LinkedIn and message you there. So, well, thank you again, Janet. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I'll be talking to you soon. This brings us to the end of today's episode. I want to extend my sincere thanks to our guest for sharing their inspiring journey. If you'd like to connect with them, you can find their contact information in the show notes. I also want to express my gratitude to you for joining us on this exploration of the clinical research industry. I hope you found today's episode insightful. If so, please consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. It truly helps us reach more listeners. If you have any feedback, questions, or comments about the show, feel free to email me at podcast@iceconsultingllc.com. Thank you once again, and I look forward to having you joining us on our next episode of Heart of the Trial.